Namaskar and welcome to this exciting new episode of Satyology Debunking Mythology. Last time we discussed India's footprints to the east, and I think you really loved it. Before that, we had done Sugriva's travel to the east, Sugriva's travel to the west, north, and south. We have done that too. Sugriva is a great personality in Mahabharata, and it is satyological, not mythological. Today, we are going to talk about India's footprints, the impression of Indian culture, science, traditions on India's immediate neighborhood to the east, to the west. And in Ratsuyaga in Mahabharata, Nakula goes to a place where he sees the ocean on the extreme west. So you can get a hint that it's not newly traveled. And whenever you say, and I've got these questions for him, and I'll start off over there. Every time we hear many leaders in India and Hindus, they always complain invaders came to from the west, but we never invaded anyone else. But is that historically correct or not correct? So we have a great author, a friend, and a teacher, and a very famous personality in India, Shri Prashant Paul. Namaskar and welcome, sir. Uh, so this is a myth, isn't it a myth that if the soldiers can come from the west and attack India, and Indians cannot go back? Why?
Yeah, Aditya. Thanks and namaskar to all of you. Yes, last time, as we discussed, that Indian footprints towards the east of India.
Yeah.
Now we are talking about the Indian footprints to the west of India. And yes, Indian footprints were there. Indians were going across the world, across the world. And when I say that, what I mean to say is last time also I referred Professor Angus Maddison. As we all are aware, Angus Maddison is the renowned economist. He wrote few books like The Millennium Perspective of Economics, The
Correct.
World History of Economics, and like that.
Correct.
And therein, very categorically, he has mentioned, he has proved that around 11th century, 10th century, and 11th century, Indian share for the world in the world trade was more than 30%. 30, 31, 32% was the Indian share in the world trade. And he has mentioned that Indian ships were going all over the world. We were exporting. India was exporting various goods, including the cloth, the spices, the uh, iron, and so many things. This means that years and years going back, Indians have visited most of the places in the world. That way, we can say that Indians have, those days, the Hindus have discovered the world in a different perspective. Now, let me quote a person's whose name is Mr. Robert Baron von Han Geldern. Very large name, Mr. Robert Baron von Han Geldern. His period is 1885 to 1968. He was basically an Austrian anthropologist, a very well-known Austrian anthropologist. He studied in Vienna University, and due to his sheer interest, he visited India in 1910, 1910. 1910, he visited India, went to this Myanmar, that time it used to call Brahmadesh, Burma, and all. That portion he has visited, he studied a lot, he did a lot of research, and then he has put forward, he has very categorically said that the Indian ships were going to South America 1,500 years, and even prior to that, they were going there. And he said that there are the solid proof that Indians had visited South American countries long back. He had specifically mentioned about Mexico and Peru. But then when we researched more, we found that whether it's a Venezuela, Guatemala, Honduras, all these places, wherein earlier the Maya culture was there, Inca culture was there, Aztec Empire was there. Therein we will find that lot of footprints of Hindu culture, Hindu civilization, Hindu gods and all. Particularly, if we refer that, the Lord Ganesha is the Lord of Hindu people, is the God of Hindu people, to whom Hindu worship for beginning of any new venture. So before any new venture, generally Hindu worship Lord Ganesha. It is called elephant-headed god. So his head is elephant type, elephant style. So elephant-headed god. Surprisingly, those days in South America, elephants were not found. And that's why where this elephant-headed god had come. So naturally, it was through the Hindu merchants, Hindu traders who were visiting the South American countries. As I said, that Guatemala, Honduras, Mexico, and all. There is a famous European anthropologist. His name is Alexander von Humboldt. He's old one. 200 years back, he did a lot of research. And Mr. Alexander von Humboldt had said in his books that South American civilization was inspired from Hindu civilization. He gave various facts with his statement that how Hindu civilization was had impressed the South American civilization. Then let me quote another historian. He was not an anthropologist in that sense. He was basically an architect. I mean, he is an Australian architect. His name is Graeme R. Kersley, Kersley, Kersley. And he has written a lot about the Indian impression there and all. Let me quote what he's written about the Lord Ganesh, and that's Lord Ganesh presence in the South American countries. I quote, in considering the transfer of specific aspects of myth and iconography from Asia and India in particular, the god good luck. Generally, Ganesha is considered as a god for good luck because as I said, that for beginning of any new venture, we worship God Ganesha. So God good luck. Trade and commercial relationships, who received the adoration and propitiation from long distance traders and mariners among the devotees. It was Ganesha. This deity was usually depicted in anthropomorphic form with an elephant head, as he is unusually depicted in identical forms in Central America among the Maya. He writes further, and I quote again, a ritual vessel from the classic Maya showing what appears to be an elephant deity depicting reasonably faithful, probably from a mariner's description from Buddhist or Hindu India, the special deity as Ganesha, the god of protection and luck in ventures. And at the end he writes, he says, Inca themselves, that Inca civilization, Inca themselves appear to have preserved their origins from the Aryans of India, unquote. My point here is that we can collect lot many such examples, and whatever various anthropologists, lot of various historians have said, but it is very certain that there were the footprints of Hindu or Indian traders or mariners in South American countries. That is, we can say that that's for sure. In Mexico, this place called Diego Rivera. In Diego Rivera, there is a beautiful temple of Shankar and Ganesha. God Shankar is the father of Lord Ganesh of God Ganesha. So Shankar Ganesha temple is there. Then there is another place in again Mexico, Veracruz. In Veracruz, during the excavation, they found that Ganesha idols were there. So they found the Ganesha idols, which were long back. In Venezuela, place called Quiragua, the Aztec Empire has its all proofs that that Ganesha was worshipped. They found that various sculptures and other things by which they say that the Lord Ganesha was worshipped in the Aztec Empire. In Guatemala, the Maya culture was there, and they found that the elephant-headed god was worshipped in Guatemala as well. My point is, after when the Spanish people have come to South American countries, sort of invaded the South America, Portuguese and Spanish. Then naturally, the Maya civilization, Inca civilization, it is all sort of is not there. That they're trying to remove this kind of civilization. But there in today, when the people are trying to find out, people are trying to do a lot of research on that. They found that yes, there was a great civilization. Maya Inca civilization was there. Aztec Empire was great in its own way, and it was inspired from the Hindu civilization. That's what my point is.
No, exactly. I think you quoted some very well-known authors, and I have studied their research, and I put that in my first book also, Debunking Mythology. And there is a
Uh-huh.
Professor Ram Mena in University of Mexico. He has come on our show some time back, and he had documented. I think one of his assistant professors had come. He had documented 10,000-year-old history of Mexico and their connection with India. 10,000-year-old.
Uh-huh.
In fact, many places like Cancun, and
Cancun.
he said that Cancun is a misabbreviation of a place in India called Coimbatore.
Ah,
He said that many of the South Indian traders had come over there. Even the name, he had a great answer for origins of the word Mexico. And Peru, and the countries which publicly acknowledge are Peru, Ecuador, Chile. They publicly acknowledge that yes, there are connections with Indian philosophy somewhere or the other. But my question is that we always we are saying it. Is there something getting documented in the traditional textbooks of the students in India where they can be told all these things?
very good question. Unfortunately, no, and that's the a pain to I think every Indian who understands the the history of India, because still last time I mentioned during one of my series that they still we teach to our students that India was discovered by Vasco da Gama. So this is unfortunate part of it. Prior to that, that's what precisely I'm saying, that there are the proofs which says that thousands years back, Indians went to literally all nook and corner of the world, everywhere, and still we are. I mean, as you rightly said that time, that Vasco da Gama discovered India in Spanish perspective. That is
Correct.
okay, but in Indian's perspective, how it could be that India was discovered? Now, as regards to this solid proof is concerned, there was a great historian who was archaeologist also in India, whose name was Dr. Vishnu Vakankar. He was the head of archaeology department of University of Ujjain in Madhya Pradesh, that's central province of India. He did a lot of research, and he was a person who had really discovered the Bhimbetka caves in central India, which are wherein the Stone Age carvings are there, pictures are there of people and horses and so many other things. and those pictures or the carved pictures are 35 to 40,000 years old. So those Bhimbetka caves was discovered by him. He went to, and he was very curious of trying to find out the kind of Hindu footprints and all. He went to US long back. I'm talking about 1984. He went to San Diego, and that time the head of San Diego Museum was Mr. Berryfell, Professor Berryfell. So he had a long chat with Professor Berryfell, and he has documented in his book. Professor Berryfell told him that at the northern tip of Mexico, that is northwest of Mexico, there is a province called Yucatan. In that Yucatan province, there is a place called Taosuco. I probably may not pronounce properly, but Taosuco is a town. In that Taosuco town, still there is a sun temple. The sun temple represents this Maya culture, Maya civilization. In that sun temple, there is an inscription which writes that in the 9th century, there was a great Indian captain. It has been written there. The great Indian captain Vasuluun, name of that person was Vasuluun, had visited this place. Now, this is a, I mean to say, this is a concrete example, a concrete proof. And prior to that, whatever I have mentioned about various famous anthropologists and historians, they are also saying the same thing again and again, that Indians have literally, and most important thing is that those days sailing in a sea and seas the different kind of weather, very difficult kind of scenario, condition, situation. We didn't have modern gadgets those days to really monitor and all those things. And during such, in such environment, Indians have sailed themselves to various parts of the world. They had a very good type of shipbuilding technology with them. A big and huge ships were there. India was leading in the shipbuilding industry, shipbuilding technology also. And many people have, Marco Polo is much later, but even prior to that, many people have mentioned about how the ships were there. It was mentioned that during the first century, second century, there was a ship sailed from Bengal to Sri Lanka. All the Buddhist monk went by, and therein 600 monks or 600 Buddhist disciples went from Bengal to Sri Lanka in a one ship. Sailors were different. So such a huge ships used to be there in those days. I mean, those were documented by many people. So we had that. I mean, Indians or Hindu have that technology, and they were visiting various parts of the world in all the places. But at the same time, that is one thing that how the Hindus went for as a traders or as a kind of a merchants or like that. But there are some Hindus who have migrated themselves in a various parts of the world. And there is a theory which you might have discussed earlier, that OIT, out of India theory. Professor Shrikant Talgeri has put this theory, and other people also put this theory. Conradist and all have seconded that or have said that yes, this is the theory wherein they said that the Indians have migrated much even before the Christ. So they call it, the place is the Uttar Kuru. And there is again a great historian from Europe. His name is Druis Belenois Ategnatos. Druis Belenois Ategnatos. He has written, he did a lot of research on the Celtic community. We call it Celtic or Celtic community, which is there in the Europe. These days it is in the Britain. In the Britain, that is basically Ireland and Scotland, Wales, Cornwall, like that, those parts of the Britain. He says that these are the people who were basically from Uttar Kuru. region of India. Uttar Kuru was basically on the north of Jammu and Kashmir. Today, whatever Jammu and Kashmir we have seen, that is Jammu and Kashmir in total, not only the Indian or Pak occupied, it's total Jammu and Kashmir, which has this Baltistan and all. So that was completely Hindu area, and we all are aware that Shankaracharya temple is there on the Srinagar. Even today, the temple is there, and Sharda Peeth is there in the, which is today Pak occupied Kashmir is there. When the Sharda Peeth is also, that temple is there. So it was completely a Hindu dominant area, or Hindu area rather, and which was reciting the Sanskrit shloka. Sanskrit was a Loka Bhasha. Lok means the language which common people used to speak among themselves. From there, that is the portion from Kyrgyzstan to Tibet, in between Kyrgyzstan to Tibet.
Yes.
Therein, when Buddhism was more dominant, sort of, I mean, more Buddhism was there. So the people who were staunch follower of Vedic tradition, they migrated from there. They probably might not have stayed there, and we have seen that Tibet was totally completely Buddhist, and even this part was also Buddhist later on, before the Muslims have invaded that. So the people who were staunch followers of Vedic tradition, Vedic religion, that way, they went towards the we call it as the western part of India, from the western side of India. And from there, they went even to Europe, various parts of Europe. And in Europe, when people did a lot of research on them, they used to be called in Europe as a Gulli, as a Keltoi, as a, various names were given to them, Gulli or Keltoi, and like that. People these days call them as a Celtic or Celtic people, who have a lot of traditions which are similar or common to Hindu traditions, Hindu way of life and all. So, like as I said, the Druis Belanois Ategnotos has already talked more about them, did a lot of research on them. There is another historian from Europe. He is Peter Beresford Ellis. Peter Beresford Ellis. He also did a lot of research on these Celtic people. And he said that these are the people from Hindu society or Hindu civilization, Hindu tradition, who have migrated into Europe, and years together, they have, sort of similar to the other people, but they still have some traditions which belong to, or which are similar to, the Vedic or Hindu traditions which are still followed in India. So that also he has very categorically said about this Celtic or this Celtic people. Then there is another group who had migrated from India again, and that group, which many of us are aware about it, that is a Yazidi group. And we are aware during this Syria ISIS war and all those things, these Yazidis were really very brutally tortured, and their condition is not very good. They are 1.5 million or even more than that. And these Yazidis are, they call themselves as, they are not Muslims. They are not Christians. They said that we have our own sort of religion. And that religion is very similar to Indian religion, or Hindu religion, I should say. Hindu pray to, or Hindu, wish to each other by saying namaste and by folding the hands. Their way of greeting each other is similar way. They fold the hands and they greet exactly in the way Indians do, Hindu do, or even the East Asians people also do, including the Japanese and all. We all greet each other with folding hands. These Yazdi do this manner. Their temples or their place of religion, place of worship, is similar to Hindu temples. They they worship a god which is on peacock. Now, peacock was not really found in or not seen in Syria and that region, but their god, which is similar to a Tamil god Subramaniam. So, so the researchers said that the Tamil group long back had migrated and they went to this place today we call it as a Syria, Iraq, and all in that region. Of course, these Yazidis are there in not only Syria, Iraq, they are there in the Armenia, they are in the Germany, some in a small portion also there in the Russia and all. But all their rituals, they, their women have a dot on their forehead. Generally, the Indian women do that, dot on the forehead. So any specific occasion is there, then the Yazidi women wear the dot on the forehead. In India, we call it bindi. So that is there. Their symbol or to what they worship has 21 sun rays. 21 has a specific importance in Indian Vedic culture and all. So the way we see that how they have the light like what we do have, we call it samay, they have the similar kind of structure of the light and all. So in whatever manner we say, they are very similar to a Hindu system, Hindu civilization, Hindu culture. Like that, there are some, we can call it as a tribal people in Europe. And when few people did a kind of a doctorate on them, they found that there many of their, in a language, a lot of words are similar to the words which are used in northern India, Indian province called Haryana. So the Haryanavi language, there are few words which are exactly similar to the words which these tribal people, which are there in Europe, they are using. Point here is that there are many such migrations which occur during various stages. Shrikant Talgeri even went back and he said that during the Rigveda, many people even during those days, people have migrated to various parts of the world, particularly today what we call it as a Europe. And Europe, then this Far East Asia and all, therein the people have migrated from India. And he has specifically mentioned various sukta in Rigveda wherein it has been written that yes, so this fellow is Persian, he went to Persia. Persia is today the Iran. This fellow went to Balochistan and like that. So like that, the communities those days with a rich culture, rich heritage went to various parts of the world, specifically the western side of India. And then they migrated there and years together, some of the their civilization, their culture was still there, which they today follow. Let me quote another example from Europe. Ukraine is a country which is came out from Russia. Ukraine was earlier part of Russia till 90s, early 90s. In a Ukraine, there is a town which is on the banks of the Black Sea, and that town is called Odessa. Spelling is Odessa, Odessa. In this Odessa town, there was a church around 20-25 years back. When they wanted to renovate that church or want to make the new building of the church, naturally they wanted to did some excavation and all those things there itself to make it a proper building and all. When they did some digging, they found an idol. sculpture, idol. That idol had three gods. In one idol, there were three gods. They didn't know, I mean, what kind of this idol is there. This idol is kept in a museum called Pushkin Museum. There is a Pushkin Museum in town called Odessa. And when someone found out, that fellow said that these gods, or this idol of the god, wherein the three goddesses are there, that is similar to Indian god from the eastern part of India called Lord Jagannatha. So Jagannatha, Lord Jagannatha, which is in Odisha, we call it today Odisha. There is a place called Puri, and in Puri we have that huge temple of that Lord Jagannatha. This Lord Jagannatha always represented by three gods or three idols in one. One is Lord Jagannatha, Balabhadra, and Subhadra. So exactly similar kind of statue, similar kind of idol was found in a place called Odessa. Now this is Odisha and that is Odessa. No one knows whether is there any similarity of that town is there or not. But yes, in Odessa, they found this kind of idol which is similar to this Lord Jagannatha. Point is that if we do such kind of research in various parts of the world, we find that somewhere here or there, Indians had visited. And again, another point, Indians who have migrated from western part or eastern part were not only from a specific area like the northern area only. No, it's not like that. Whether it's an eastern side or it's a western side, various parts of India, whether the southern part or the eastern part, this Odisha, which I'm referring, is in the eastern part. And for Yazidi, the resemblance which I was mentioning is from the southern part, in the Tamil Nadu, the Tamil god. So that is the southern part. So they all had migrated because they were probably that time have a rich kind of knowledge, rich kind of heritage and all. With that, they moved across the world in the various parts of the world. So yes, Indian footprints were there in various parts of the world.
You were about to go to Egypt.
Yes.
And just to give you one example for the viewers, where many people from Parsik is the ancient name of Persia, which from where the Greeks called it but Mahabharata calls it Parsik Desh.
Parsik.
Because you get Paras money from there. So it's a Parsik, land of Paras money, and which is used in the Vedic spiritual rituals, puja, archana, which is used as spatik, we bolte hain, spatik. So that is called there. And you correctly mentioned Ukraine. Now, these all areas, I can say specifically about Ukraine, many of them still they follow the Vaishnav cult of India, many of them. And they do come to, and we have one Ukrainian who is on the show, and she's nodding her head. Yes, they have ancient connection to India, and they do. She's from Odisha, this place you mentioned. She's one of the hosts.
Okay, great.
And they do mention that they're in very much detail. The point is that, again, I'm just surprised. It's not a question, it's just a comment, that why the textbooks of India reverse, they do not mention any of these things, which are, so sometimes the history of India, correctly or incorrectly, both has to be told from outside. The records of Indian historians are lost. Yes. So it is always our endeavor at Sathology to promote the Indian historians who can tell other parts of the world about themselves. So you can continue on that, please, because you have to cover other areas also, which I mentioned.
Yeah, sure. As you rightly said, the connection and which was always all the proofs which I have referred are all from the Western anthropologist or historian and all. Unfortunately, the Indian, that kind of documentation is not there because the invaders have, burnt a lot of universities and this and that. So probably that kind of documentation is not much with India, though it is there, and that need to come out from the shelves, and that
Correct.
is what, yeah, a lot of people are trying to do that. Just to mention a very small example from Greece, and then I'll move to that Egypt.
Yeah.
In Greece, there is a very well-known author from India. Her name is Dr. Meena Prabhu. She writes a lot of travelogue. So she is basically known for writing travelogue, interesting travelogue. She wrote around more than 10 books on the travelogue. She literally traveled across the world, everywhere, every part. She went to Greece as well. And the book name is Greekanjali. In a Indian language, we call it Greek. So Greekanjali. And therein she had mentioned an example, or rather than experience. She generally used to stay at the home because to understand the, civilization, culture, tradition, etc. So she basically stayed with her home. Coincidentally, the person from that home, I mean, basically the main person from that home was the head of Indology department of the university of that town in Greece. He said that it is a myth that when Alexander went to India, only that time the Greek and Indian connection was there. He said prior to Alexander went to India, even during that period, earlier than that, there were a lot of connection from India and Greek, and a lot of Indian scholars used to come to Greece, and Greek people were inviting the Indian scholars in a large number. He said that and then she gave a lot of resemblance of this Greek language and Indian language. Therein, like in India, for a word, we call it Shabd. Shabd means a word. In Greek language, they call it Abd. Shabd and Abd. Like that, there are a lot of resemblances are there in the language. So it is again, as I said, that myth is still percolated that after Alexander only there was, the Greek influence was there in the India. Rather, he said that there was the other way around. There was influence from Sanskrit. There are influence from the Sanskrit scholars, Hindu scholars on Greece even before Alexander visited to India. But the point which I want to make was a very strong proof that Indians were selling worldwide, and what Dr. Angus, Professor Angus Maddison is saying has a lot of strong proof is there, and that is a big project named Berenike project, which is an excavation project and which is supposed to be the largest excavation project in the world. That project name is Berenike project. Lot of organizations come together for this excavation because of the importance of this Berenike port. Berenike was a port. It is in Egypt on the Red Sea. It is 800 kilometers south of Suez Canal. So 800 kilometers south of Suez Canal on the Red Sea, and it was basically a port called Berenike. 275 years before the Christ, Ptolemy II has built this port in her mother's name. Berenike was the name of her of his mother, Berenike. This port was excellent because natural way the ships used to sail and come to that port and all that was quite nice. The environment, atmosphere, weather was also very good. So Indian ships used to come to Berenike, and from there onwards, they even used to go to the Europe and other parts of the world on the surface. And that's why Berenike was very, very important. Berenike port was one of the major ports for Egypt till the time 500 AD, that is after Christ. So up to 6th century beginning, This port was there. Then there was a plague pandemic and all. So due to that pandemic, this port was closed, and then it was closed so far. So it was an ideal site for the excavation, that they could find so many things, and that's why a lot of organizations come together for this, the biggest project in the world for excavation. The organizations which came together are the University of Delaware from US, American Philosophical Society, National Geography, Netherlands Foundation for Scientific Research, and some Netherlands ministries, Holland ministries are also there, and some other institutions are also, came together, and jointly they started this project in the year 1994. Even today, this project is going on. They do some kind of excavation, they do research, then it stopped, then again they start, like that. It's not continuously going on. Excavation is continuously going on, but it is sort of going on with some gaps in between. Now, why I'm referring this? During that excavation, they found a box, a wooden box, Indian made wooden box. When they opened it, they found the 8 kg of black pepper in that box. So 8 kg of black pepper in that box, and those days the black pepper was available only in India, and that too also the southern part of India. When they found out, when they tried to do lot of other excavation, they found that the Indian made cloths were there with the batik print, Indian style batik prints, and lot of other Indian goods they found out. And then they came to the conclusion that there was a sort of a small area wherein Indian merchants used to stay there. It was very small Indian colony, which was basically for the Indian merchants, Indian traders who were doing the trading, and for them the ships used to come from India. And the archaeologists, the scientists, the historians, they did a lot of carbon dating, and a lot of things are going on there. For the black pepper and the wooden box and other things which they found out there, when they did the carbon dating results are that these goods are from the year 30 to 70. That is in the first century. So in the first century, Indian goods were found in Berenike, which is a very solid proof that Indian ships were sailing to Egypt, and even further that, because Indians were doing the trade with almost all parts of the world. So my point here is that, again, we call it that this Silk Route with China and to Europe is much later. These people say that even prior to that, there was a spice route. From the southern part of India, the ships used to sail directly on the sea. See, generally those days the ships used to sail on beside of the land. They didn't dare those days to sail in the sea wherein nothing they could find. But they did that. They used to do that, and there was a spice route which was operated by Indians, by these Hindu mariners, many years, thousands of years together. And when Indians went to the various parts of the world, they did not do only their trading. They didn't do only the kind of commercial dealings and all. They took their civilization, they took their traditions, they took their culture along with them. And this culture, and to sum up, I am coming back to the first question, Aditya, that wherein you have mentioned that we always, the Indians or Hindu always claim that we never invade any country. We are not invaders. Is it true? And my answer is it is true, because Generally, the Indian empire or Hindu empire was primarily in the Southeast Asia. And in Southeast Asia, none of even the country says that the Indians have invaded and set up their kingdom. The Indians came there as kind of probably traders or something. And when the religion or rather than their culture, tradition, civilization was rich enough in all sense, then the people really love that, like that, because it's a peaceful. It talk about the Vishwa Kalyanam, that is the entire world should be happy. I mean, that's basically the basic uh, basic point in the Hindu philosophy, that the world should be happy. And so for the Vishwa Kalyan, the Indians used to go and they didn't fight. Rather, they wanted to have, a wealth to spread across to the entire world. And that's how I say with this session that Indian footprints were there across the world, but they all were with the wealth, with the knowledge, and with the peace in mind to the entire world. Yeah.
Great. I think Loka Samastu Sukhinu Bhavantu, the Indian philosophy. And you gave a great analogy on spice route versus silk route versus faith-based colonialist rule. The all three. Like when I see the invasion of India is like killing the golden goose. When you're getting so much benefit from India, why to destroy the culture through conversion?
Yes.
And
Let me just put a small point here, because this is a very good point you have raised. Generally, the Europeans had their colonies, after the Renaissance and all those things. Everywhere they had the colony. And what they did in the colony, we all are aware about it. They looted and a lot many things have happened. Indians also that way set up their own colony that way, but it was not a colony in that sense. The entire Southeast Asia was actually once upon a time was basically ruled by Indian kings with the Vedic kind of philosophy, with all the Sanskrit language as a as a national language and like that. Everything was happened, but they didn't impose their culture that way. They didn't impose their language in that sense, like Spanish and Portuguese in Latin America and Brazil. Hindus didn't impose their language. Hindus didn't impose their, habits of eating and all. Even those were not imposed. All the local traditions were respected in that sense. And it was not basically the Indians didn't extract the kind of a wealth or money from the kingdom wherein they had ruled in that sense, wherein the other countries created, established their colony, and they did like that. So it was not a colony in that sense. Though Indians went across the world, though Indians set up their own kingdom, though Indians set up the Vedic kingdom, but still it was not a colony in the general sense which others have established the colony. That's what I basically wanted to put here, that Indians uh, were not in that sense. Yeah, that's what my point. Sorry.
no,
I
really
talked.
good point
Yeah.
you added, because the point is that the human development, the beauty of the even today, and I can tell you about US, and you mentioned San Diego where I live, and this show is hosted from San Diego,
Great.
and and you mentioned the professor's name, and probably I'll go and check them out. And Yucatan, I have already covered that in one of my books, that Yucatan,
Ah,
how Surya Temple, I visited that.
good.
That picture is also there in the book. And the so I can verify what you said easily. And one of the things which stands out with the Indians in USA and other places is that they have been always a voice of reason. Now, if you look at the movies being made out, because movies display what's going on in the society,
Yes.
the doctors, the engineers will always be from India. That is the general image you see that. And also, if you look at the now, even the vice president of US will be an Indian lady.
Yes.
So see, the point is that the the soft display of power of India has been non-military, like you said, culture and trade. Somehow, these faith-based colonialists, I call them, because they invaded India for propagating their faith. That is very clear. That's the only reason they came. And and to subjugate the local population, because that's what their experience was. That was only their experience. In their countries also they subjugated. It's not that they just did in India. And so their way of power projection was being barbaric and hateful. And that's how they did to India, that by destroying. But now now everything is getting exposed now, and our channel is doing a great job in exposing also
Yes,
parts of it, not great all of it, but somewhere we are involved. But now the point is that we have to academically and informationally expose them, and also reinitiate these routes, because like you said, Vasco da Gama did not discover India. In fact, India discovered them, and they were so lost. So the entire Renaissance in the European period started from 1600s, and the entire Renaissance in the Islamic history started from discovering India from 752 AD, because Afghanistan is the first place they came after Parsik, which is 653, and 654 AD their discovery of India started. And that's how they try to come to India. Now we have to come up with some projects where we start documenting and challenging those narratives point by point. Do you think that is possible?
absolutely. Yes, that we should do that.
We should do that.
Yeah,
Thank you so
absolutely.
much, Prashantji, for your time today. And
Yeah,
thank
thank
you,
you.
viewers who have loved it. You have sent many questions, and I will ask them in the next show. We'll go south. Can we go south now? Or no?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Thank you all very much. Namaskar.